This podcast may contain subject matter that some listeners may find disturbing or harmful. Audience discretion is advised.
Giving free one-sided therapy to the stars of reality. It's Rachel and Kacie with CBT and the TV. CBT and the TV.
Hello, darlings, dears, and fellow queers, and welcome back to CBT in the TV. As always, I am Kacie, not Rachel.
And I am Rachel, not Kacie.
And this week, we are diving into Season 2, Episode 2 of Dance Moms, Return of the Candy Apples. But of course, that's not what we're calling it. We're calling it Return of the Crap. Get it? What it is, what it does, what it is, what it isn't. But before we do that, we do have to start our day with checking in with Rachel and Kacie's Jar of Fun. And because this episode will be going out at my favorite time of year, the week of Halloween, Rachel, what will you be doing with yourself for All Saints Day, Halloween, Dia de los Muertos, and Diwali? Because they're all happening right around the same time.
I will be working.
It's exciting. We'll probably also be working, but then in the evening, we get to celebrate with our neighborhood. We have a fun little party, and it's going to be doubly fun this year because a lot of our neighbors also celebrate Diwali. So we're going to have like twice the fun this year. All right, and then let's check in with our snacks and drinks, and our friendly reminder to all of our darling listeners to please take a moment to grab yourself a snack and a drink and feed and hydrate yourself right along with us, because you're special and important and you deserve to be fed and hydrated. Rachel, what you got?
So these are my favorite from the they're from the gas station. It's edible chocolate cookie dough.
Oh, yeah.
And I, so far, have only been able to find it at Sheetz, which is an East Coast gas station. And then to drink, I have a Fanta.
I have a juice box. And then for my snack, I got Reese's Pieces, because trick or treat. I think we're ready to go ahead and just jump into the episode. And everybody hold on tight to your big people pants, panties, and hats, because Kathy's coming to town. All right, so the episode opens with Abby calling everyone in for Pyramid, and as the moms and the girls file in, Abby tells us in an interview that overall she would consider the competition in North Carolina mediocre. She says that she does think that the girls were cute in the dance and that the costumes were adorable, but that overall she thinks they were sloppy. And then we jump right into Pyramid. Abby tells the girls that they are not the same dancers who won nationals last season, and that they're lucky that cute still works in the Carolinas. Abby also takes the opportunity to tell Kendall that she did her solo scared to death, and that her face was not the face of an Abby Lee Miller. Which, like, what a weird way to say this to anyone, but let alone an 8-year-old. Your face doesn't look like it belongs to me, child. Like, it sounds like a Disney villain. Say it wasn't up to your standard of performance. Say something that like helps her understand it, but that's beyond Abby, and we know that. But it's just she prides herself on being a great teacher, and she says this shit.
I think she calls herself a great teacher because she produces great outcomes, but that doesn't mean she's a good teacher.
Jill cuts in telling Abby like that, but it was just Kendall's first time, you can't really judge her on that. And Abby just like cuts her off with the full puppet hand, is like, "Nyeh," tells her to shush. It's not your turn to talk, Jill. It's mine. And like, I don't often agree with Abby, but every once in a while I do. This is one of those times. I do think overall Jill just needs to learn to shut up. Abby goes on to tell the girls that they're going to be traveling to Columbus, Ohio, and she reminds the girls that they all know who lives in Ohio, and Chloe responds with her very iconic candy apples, woo! And all the girls start giggling and whooping and getting excited to go up against their rivals. Christy tells us in an interview that Kathy is like a cold sore that won't go away no matter how hard you wish it would. Still there, just like, I'm here, and you're like, go away. And just for a little extra behind the scenes fun, Christy revealed on the Back to the Bar podcast that she initially said that Kathy was like herpes or glitter, but production asked her to change it so that they'd be able to air the clip. And I think that it's extra funny that cold sore is fine for cable TV, but herpes isn't, especially when cold sores are the herpes virus.
Thank you.
Semantics
Thank you.
will never make sense to me, but autism. So, like you will never be able to explain that to me. Abby tells the moms that she doesn't want them squawking with each other this weekend because she needs them to be a united front in front of Kathy. So they all need to come together to take a big bite out of those little apples. Like, I just hate that Abby and Kathy use such like violent language with the children about like coming at the other team. This is a tradition that will carry on for Abby and Kathy with the children, and it's uncomfy. Abby then begins to talk about how the girls were placed on the pyramid this week, and Abby reveals that the lowest place on the pyramid has gone to Kendall. She reminds Kendall again that she's on probation, but of course she still doesn't explain what that means to Kendall or Jill. Abby, listen, we get it. The kid gets it. She knows she's on whatever it is you're calling probation, but unless you explain to her what that is, it doesn't matter. Like, stop saying it. You're wasting your breath. Save your breath. Save your spoons. We know you like to yap. We all love to yap here too, but like, make it mean something, okay? Abby tells Kendall that she's going to be watching her like a hawk. And in an interview, Kendall tells us that she was really sad to be at the bottom of the pyramid this week because she feels like she did her best. And again, this was the first time I've watched this season really trying to analyze it, and it's so interesting to hear the way Kendall talks about herself at the beginning of her time on Dance Moms versus how she's going to come to talk about herself. I think she had confidence in herself at the beginning of things, and it's really sad to see where that ends.
Mm-hmm. I think too, like, it just goes to show that like it doesn't matter the effort that you put in. Abby is still like, it doesn't matter how well you do either, because I think if she were on probation, it doesn't matter if she won the whole competition or if she didn't, she would probably still be at the bottom of the pyramid.
Well, Abby just said last week, like, nothing's ever going to be good enough for me. Next on the pyramid is baby Kenzie. Abby tells Kenzie that the reason she's still at the bottom of the pyramid is that Abby keeps giving her all these little parts to do in the group dances so that she can be on stage with the big girls, but then Kenzie gets on stage and she doesn't do the dance. And that when Maddie was 7, she could have done the choreo no problem. Like, here's the thing, Abby. You were right when you said you give Kenzie small parts to do in the group dances. Last week you had her dancing in a box with less than a square foot of space to stand in. Her pigtails didn't even fit. Like, she also had plastic sheeting in her face until the last little bit of the dance when the girls came to get her out of the box. And that's why you want them both on your team. You don't want a whole... I know she always thinks she wants a whole team of Maddies, but actually, she'd kind of end up hating that.
I don't think that she would be able to choose a favorite, and that would frustrate her.
It's not just that, because she brings Kalani on the team, and Kalani and Maddie are actually very similar. But she gets frustrated because she can't give them both the same style and have them in the same age category and they both win. She can only get one winner, and she can't choreograph a bunch of different styles. You need a JoJo, you need a Bryn, you need a Mackenzie, you need a Brooke. You need people that do different things. Abby tells next up on the pyramid is Brooke. And Abby tells Brooke that she knew the number, she danced fine, but that all the drama and all the crying before they left for competition is just not what a young adult does. And first off, Abby, last week when Brooke came off stage from the group number, you were yelling at her for looking at Chloe to see what came next. And you told them just at the beginning of Pyramid that all of them were sloppy. So, like, which is it? Did Brooke know the dance and she danced fine? Or was she not knowing the next step and had to look at Chloe and all of the girls were sloppy? You can't have it both ways. Because I really don't understand how you can possibly confuse the two. And also, the drama you're saying she was making a big deal about and then crying and fussing about was you calling a 13-year-old little girl trashy. And as we discussed last week, a 13-year-old little girl cannot be considered a young adult. So, checkest thyself before thou wreckest thyself. Paige is next on the pyramid, and Abby tells Paige that while she did a great job at the competition and danced very well on the bus home, Paige had to be told to sit down 32 times. And how does Abby know that it was 32 times? Well, It's because she tells everyone she counted. Now, aside from the fact that there are many reasons children may be fidgety, some children may be fidgety every day, some only once in a while, it does not mean that they're doing it to be annoying or willfully defiant. Besides all that, Kelly points out that practically all of the kids were up and down on the bus all weekend too, and all of the moms vocalized that yes, all of the kids were doing.
So I have made a similar drive, but a similar drive would be a minimum of 7 hours. And anybody who works with kids knows that kids cannot sit for 7 hours, which is why they have recess at school.
Yeah.
So we're putting them in a bus in a space where they're not getting any of this like newness or like change of scenery, so to speak. In school, you're constantly changing subjects or activities. Like there's specific time limits so that you don't overextend that and you can keep their attention. But these girls are what, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and you're expecting them to sit for
Quietly.
7 hours with their best friends.
Uh-huh. That most of them only see at dance because it's not like they go to school together. And Abby, in her all of her narcissistic tendency glory, decides that she's going to point out to Kelly that just because the other kids were doing it doesn't mean that it was okay for Paige to do it. And Kelly asks Abby why she doesn't chastise the other kids, and Abby just reiterates, all I'm saying is just because Paige saw everyone else doing it doesn't mean it was okay for her. And Ray, I've really got to get your take on this, because brushing aside the fact that Abby just said, or rather screamed last week, that she wasn't going to critique the Highlands kids on their manners or behavior anymore, the way
I think sometimes we see it in the school system, especially for those kiddos who are neurodivergent and ADHD, or they're later diagnosed ADHD, and so they get this label on them of kind of being the class clown or inattentive or a goof off or a rule breaker, and all of the other kids may be doing this one thing, but it's as soon as that kid does that particular thing, because the teacher is watching them specifically, then they get in trouble. But they're like, but everybody else was doing it. And so this kid is then held to different expectations. And I'm not saying that Paige is neurodivergent, but she specifically is being held to different expectations than everybody else when everybody else was doing it, because she was being watched specifically.
I also wanted to ask about a different take on this situation: intrafamilial family torture. Because in regards to Brooke and Paige with Abby, we just saw what Abby did to Brooke last week, and now here we are at Pyramid with Abby doing this particularly strange thing to Paige. The whole team does kind of function like a family, but aside from that, for the Highlands, there is familial history with Abby's family and the Highlands family being very intertwined. There's this whole extra level, and so it's almost like Abby is like an aunt to them. And so there's this extra level of, like, when Abby talks to the rest of the kids, that's their dance teacher, and she's Miss Abby, so she's, an extra kind of dance teacher. But when she talks to Paige and Brooke, it's a little different. And the way specifically that she goes off at and after Paige felt familiar to me. It felt like something I'd seen before.
I mean, we know, if any of our listeners have divorced parents and at least one of your parents is a narcissist, you are very familiar with being used as the tool to hurt the other parent. Regardless of the harm that it causes to you, as long as it causes harm to the other adult in the relationship, that's all the narcissist is going for. And I kind of think that it's similar to that. Is Abby knows the quickest way to hurt Kelly is to hurt her children. She doesn't necessarily care that she's hurting the children. She just cares about hurting Kelly.
I used to think that way, but then the more I've watched the show to analyze it, the more I've noticed Abby's like enjoyment, not just in the parents' response, but in the kids' emotional response. I wasn't noticing her enjoyment before, and now I think I am, and that's where I wonder if there's more to it. Like, yes, I think she knows it gets at Kelly, but I think she also enjoys messing with Paige and Brooke and Chloe, and she's eventually going to enjoy messing with Nia and Kendall, and eventually Kenzie. Anyway, Kelly tells us in an interview that she doesn't think it matters what her kids do, that her kids are always going to be at the bottom of the pyramid, and that she also thinks that messing with her kids is Abby's way of torturing her. Next on the pyramid is Nia, and instead of celebrating Nia's placement at the competition in the top 5 or showcasing Nia's show of independence without Holly last week and how hard that must have been, Abby just says, I left you in the same spot you were in from last week. Nia, maybe next time someone from your family can actually show up and care about you and clap a little. I love how Abby tries to say she's not racist. Like, but ma'am, what on earth would you even call this? Like, this isn't even thinly veiled. This isn't a microaggression. Just because you presented it in a passive aggressive manner doesn't make it any less of a full force accusation of neglect. And of all of the OG moms, the only mom she ever actually accuses of neglect is Holly.
And we're also seeing yet another very explicit placement on the pyramid simply because of the parent and not
Oh,
because
I fully
of
believe the whole
child.
the whole pyramid aside from Maddie is based on parent. Holly just stands there with the look on her face. I know that so many of us are familiar with the nothing you do really surprises me at all anymore, but even for you, this was shocking face. Next on the pyramid is Chloe, and Abby just unceremoniously rips the cover off of her headshot and says, "You did a great job." I swear, she is so unenthused about the whole thing that all that's missing is the like if she'd said it like you did a great job, yeah, that's the only way this could have been more unenthused.
Is because it was Chloe.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, I really wonder if she has an irrational fear of saying something genuinely nice to Chloe's face in front of Christy. I think if we knew that, it would explain a lot.
It's possible.
And of course, rounding out the top of the pyramid is Maddie. Abby says that Maddie's at the top of the pyramid because she did a great job, but she says, I've seen you dance better and I want you to get back to where you were at nationals.
Which is wild. I mean, and that was something that I wrote down is like, they may have explained this and cut it out of what we saw, but they didn't really explain why Maddie was placed above Chloe. If they both did a really good job, they both placed first in their respective categories.
I think I think they left it to us to
create a narrative.
Accept that. No, I don't think they left it to us to create a narrative. They're creating the narrative. They left it to us to digest that the entire reason that Maddie is above Chloe is because Maddie's above Chloe. That's it. Those producers think their audience is really stupid. They'll spoon feed us some absolute like bullshit that is very clear to everybody. Like, this show was watched by children and they didn't need that explained to them, but they won't explain this because they know that would ruin the show. Like, they know, they're like, yeah, you probably don't need us to tell you that. You've got that figured out by now, right? We move on to assignments, and Abby tells us we're doing a jazz number for the group this week entitled Bad Apples, and all of the girls giggle, getting the joke. Abby says that this number is a little 40s inspired, but it's also a little Katy Perry, so you know it's going to be kicked up, and that it's going to be sassy. This, of course, was at the time where Katy Perry was pre-cringe. It was still in the teenage dream California Girls era, so doing a Katy Perry dance was an exciting thing. She also tells everyone that they'll need to have their hair in rats and snoods to fit the 40s aesthetic. No, you don't need to clean out your earbuds. I did say rats and snoods. But she doesn't like explain what those things are because, you know, it's not like she cares about her kids knowing dance history or understanding every little detail Oh, wait, let me check my notes. She actually does say she cares about that and that it's one of the most important things to her as an educator. So I'll just give everyone here a second to have a good eye roll.
She, though,
to buy it. On the bright side of all of this, because she didn't explain it, we do get this adorable interview with Kenzie, who says, like,
what's a snood?
No one's gonna put a rat in my hair, and a snood. What's a snood? And I am sure that until someone explained these things to these children, they probably did think they were going to have fake rats in their hair on stage, and that a snood sounded like something that the Lorax sneezed in the Dr. Seuss universe. Like, it sounds like the machine that puts the stars on the sneed's belly. Like, what the heck?
I mean, I bet that, like, they were like, well, Kenzie, this is a snood, and she was still like, why is it called that?
Oh, yeah. And when they showed her the rat, she's like, you mean a deconstructed bun donut? I can make that with a sock. Like, what is even this? Abby goes on to tell Brooke that she's going to have a solo this week and that she'll be competing head-to-head with one of the candy apples and that she wants Brooke to go out there and make applesauce out of that kid. So, just like great role model. Abby gives me indigestion like every time I hear them doing this, like the candy apples with the clean Chloe's clock. And why? Abby goes on to tell Brooke that she really wants to psych Kathy's kid out, so she wants Brooke backstage early, warming up all of her best tricks, and that she wants that little apple in a puddle of tears before she ever sets foot on stage. Like, what the fuck, Abby? What is with her reveling in children's trauma? Is it giving masochism? I can't tell. Abby reiterates that they really need to make applesauce out of Kathy's team this weekend before dismissing the moms and starting rehearsal. As the girls get started with rehearsal, the moms head upstairs to dance Jill, and they're all very eager to hear what Jill thought of her first pyramid experience. Jill, of course, does not disappoint. Well, she doesn't disappoint production, because what she says makes for a storyline that's going to continue for the rest of the original series. My little Kendall deserves more, even if that means all of your kids get less. In what I can only describe as a preschool teacher rendition of her 900 number voice, Jill says that she really didn't think Kendall would be at the bottom. And when Christy says that it's probably going to take a while for Kendall to make the climb to anywhere near the top, Jill says that she thinks it's an awful lot of pressure to put on a little kid. She only had 3 days to prepare, and her music got changed the night before. The other moms all laugh in response and say in one way or another, like, what do you think we've been putting up with for all these years? Do you think that this just started happening because of the show? They don't say that out loud, but like that's what they were saying to her. You just got here, and like you really expect us to feel bad for you for the same things that we've been putting up with for all this time. Like, we'll commiserate with you and with Kendall, but like we don't agree that you putting up with the same things that we do for far less time than we have means that you should earn privileges that none of the rest of us will probably ever get. Like, that's not a thing. Jill, of course, continues to ardently defend her stance that Kendall should have been much, much higher on the pyramid, and she is also asking everyone to agree with her, which Christy points out that in order for Kendall to have been moved up the pyramid, someone else would have had to have been moved down. And Jill agrees that, like, yeah, that's what she's saying. But then she catches herself and says, well, sort of, because it's also subjective. Holly tells us in an interview that she has a pretty good idea of who Jill was alluding to being moved down the pyramid in order to make room for Kendall. It's Nia. Christy tells us that she thinks that Kendall should probably just take up like permanent residency at the bottom of the pyramid for a while so she can get used to how it feels. And while I am 1,000,000% sure that Christy meant Jill when she was saying all of this, but of course the moms aren't the ones with their pictures on the pyramid, I really do wish that the moms would sometimes like stop and listen to what they're saying, because this sounds just extra yucky. I don't think Christy wanted Kendall to suffer. I think she wanted Jill to like have a reality check, but this wording sounds awful. Back in rehearsal, Abby is teaching the girls the group choreography, and she tells us that the competition they'll be attending while they're in the land of the apples is the Rising Star competition. She also tells us that this week's dance is a little bit Andrew's Sisters, so think Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and a little bit Katy Perry, but also a big bit of a jab at Cappy and the whole apple thing. Because, thanks, Abby. We never would have gotten that on our own. This is what I mean by the producers think we're fucking morons, okay? They don't think we've got two brain cells to rub together. Up at Vance jail, the moms are going at it with Jill, insisting that for all Kendall did, even only given 3 days to get ready, she really does think that Abby should have thrown her at least a little bone. And in an interview, Kelly tells us that she really doesn't understand what Jill thought was going to happen when they joined this team. And personally, I think that Jill was probably suffering from a particularly bad case of failed future fake. Like, where you think that if you could just ace that one class or start that business that you had the idea for, all of your problems would be solved and you'd be the most successful person ever and you'd be set. Not that you really intend on studying for that class. I mean, have you seen the syllabus? That teachers' expectations are completely nuts. Or that you ever really plan to leave the job you already have because you're about to reach a milestone at your 401k in entrepreneurship. In this economy, no ma'am, we do not know her. Everyone future fakes. Everyone does it. But most of us come back to reality. Jill, however, takes years, and I do mean years, to realize that Abby was never going to treat Kendall differently, and that their special moment of being the chosen ones ended at the exact same time it started, when Kendall was picked at the audition.
Because Abby didn't even pick her.
Yeah, but that is decidedly not the way that Jill sees anything. Jill has delusions of grandeur. Am I saying that Jill actually has delusions? No. Am I saying that she has, like I said, we all future fake. Jill suffers from constant future fake. And she, again, like the rest of us, come back down to earth and we're like, wait, I'm not going to do that. She never does that. And it'd be fine if she was just doing it for herself, but she's doing it with her kid, and that's not healthy. As the moms continue in vain to try to convince Jill of this misjudgment, Christy just decides to go full-on chaos gremlin and straight up ask Jill if she really thinks that Kendall performed better than Nia did at the competition. And Jill hems and haws for a moment because, even though she's saying something pretty awful, she's still trying to say it in a way that will make everyone like her. It's so weird to watch. But eventually she says that yes, she thinks that the only reason that Kendall didn't place higher than Nia was because they were in two separate age categories. And this to me is so very truly and utterly unhinged for her to have said it all, let alone to have said in front of Holly. Now, personally, I truly hate it when the kids are compared, so I don't want to do it, but I am going to break last week's score placement down just because this is too unhinged to go unchecked. The reason that this is so wild for Jill to just have go ahead and said it is because Nia placed in the top 5 in the older age category, which means higher difficulty and technique levels would have been expected of her from the judges. Kendall didn't place at all in the top 10, which means, and that was in the lower age category, which means she had lower expectations for both technique and difficulty. So, purely from a dance perspective, this is Delulu to the billionth degree. And this is no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade to Kendall. I think, like I said, if she really only had 3 days, even if she had only a month to learn that dance last week, she nailed it and deserves all the flowers. And I don't think she gets it. Most people forget she had this solo. She deserves so much credit. But I cannot believe that Jill went out and said this. Cannot.
I mean, I can, but Jill is just one of those humans that, when they say something, you look at them like they're a 4-year-old trying to tell you the coolest story ever and the funniest joke. And you look at them and you're like, yeah, okay, buddy. Well, that's cool.
I don't think I could when she says stuff like this. I'd have been, because, from a relational and also like kind of from a teaching perspective, I don't think I could ever imagine saying this about someone else's kid in front of them. And so like it reminds me of the parents that I encountered working in education who like seem to forget that other people's children are other people's children, because to those people, their children are like the most precious beings on the entire planet and everyone should treat them that way, but then they treat other people's children like garbage. Like, so I don't think I could ever look at her and be like, yeah, buddy, that's so cool. Because I'd be like, Nia is a full-blown person and she worked her butt off last week and she did amazing. And she scored higher in a harder age group. Shut your mouth. I don't think I could have done it. And like, I'm for sure that production was all up in Jill's ear at the beginning of this season because she probably would have been considered fresh meat. And they probably would have found it really fun and easy to rile her up. But Christy and Kelly said that what we see on camera was pretty much what it was like to be around Jill for the first bit of this season. That they didn't have a lot of time to get to know her before she was set loose with all of these things to say about how she wanted to be treated and how she expected all of this for her kid. And I cannot imagine how jarring, but also like uncomfortably familiar, I'm looking at you, Kacie, this must have been. In an interview, Melissa tells us that she thinks that Jill just got used to Kendall being the star at their last studio, but that Kendall's not the star here, and that's got to be hard on Jill. Poor Jill.
Now that's some shade.
Right? Christy tells Jill that she thinks that it's a little weird for Jill to want them to all be nice and accepting towards her and towards Kendall, but then she keeps saying things like, my kid was better than yours and we deserve more than you. Which, like, facts. In an interview, Christy goes on to say that she thinks that joining the moms is kind of like joining a sorority. You know, you have to pledge a little, then you have to sit back and pay your dues for a while, and then like once you make it in, and then you can start making your moves to move up the ladder once you've truly had time to learn the ins and outs. And I kind of think this was a good analogy because when you join a sorority at a college, like you're kind of expected to be there for at least 4 years. So you're going to have at least your sophomore year and the rest of your freshman year where you kind of got to just sit and learn how everything works. And I think Christy's just saying, like, sit with us for at least a season. Come on. Chill out.
Yeah.
And Christy was
just wait, it gets crazy.
Oh, it gets crazier. You wouldn't think it could, but it can. Jill tells the moms that she just doesn't agree with them. She still thinks that Kendall just deserves more. And all the moms respond. Even Melissa is getting animated at this point, and they yell back that they all think that their own kids deserve more, but that tearing each other's kids down to make that happen is not how their team works. But Jill just responds that she doesn't have time to worry about all of your kids. I have to worry about mine.
I mean, granted, that does eventually start to happen, but...
It takes years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I was saying about, like, it's giving entitled parent who does not view other children as human, only as obstacles for their own offspring. Like, it's gross, right? Christy, once again, decides that we have not had enough chaos on this good day, so she convinces, and by convinces I mean tricks, Jill into believing that she is still in her honeymoon period with Abby, and that she would be allowed to go downstairs and talk to Abby during rehearsal about all of her concerns, and that Abby would probably be happy to listen to her. Now, I'm not big on hazing and mean-spirited initiation, but I am all for some good old-fashioned karma, and Jill has done my sweet baby Nia wrong. So, when Jill heads downstairs and walks straight into the studio without even taking her heels off first, I am here for it.
Also, just Christy in this episode is so chaotic good, it's not even funny.
I don't think she, the thing is, I don't think she would define herself as chaotic good. I think she defined herself as chaotic evil. She was like, I was just going around doing what I gotta set it off.
Malicious compliance.
Yep, exactly. Jill interrupts rehearsal, asking Abby for 2 minutes of her time. Abby tells Jill that this is not how rehearsal works. She can't be in here, and she certainly cannot be in here with her shoes on Abby's Marley dance floors. These are very expensive dance floors, friends. You don't fuck with them. In an interview, Abby tells us that she just doesn't think that Jill's caught on to how things work at her studio yet, and that Jill may have been at this dance mom thing a long time and have spent thousands of dollars on competition entrance fees, but she really should have been putting all of that money towards some technique classes for her kid. And like, yikes. The first part of that statement was a good burn, but like, leave the nasty stuff about the kid out of it, okay? As the confrontation between Jill and Abby gets underway, up in dance jail, Christy is ready for the show and asks if anyone has any popcorn. Jill starts out strong.
Just love her so much.
I know, and says, "Look, Abby, we played by your rules for a week and we did the probation thing. Now you tell me how to get Kendall to the top of the pyramid because I don't like her at the bottom." I love how even Jill admitted, like, we only did it for a week. Abby explains that she doesn't need anything more from Jill, that the rest is all up to Kendall. Kendall has to do the work. And Abby has the girls show Jill a part of the dance, and she calls out the same correction to Kendall over and over and over. And then she turns to Jill and she says, "Do you see how she's still not doing it?" And Jill asks Kendall to fix the problem in her 900th of voices. She calls her, "Kendall, honey, do the thing." And Abby tells Jill that they can't have honey, honey, honey. That's not how this works. And she tells Jill that being on this team is like being at Harvard. Everyone pays thousands of dollars to be there. Everyone is a top student. And everyone wants to be valedictorian. But come graduation day, there's still only going to be one valedictorian at the podium. Abby then asks all of the girls who wants to be at the top of the pyramid. And I think everyone except for Brooke raised their hand. And Abby says, "See?" And Jill seems to at least like partially understand, and she like shrugs and she goes, "Well, okay." Like apparently she needed the actual visual aid. She couldn't like just believe absolutely everyone else telling her. And then she retreats back upstairs. And like, while I don't agree with everything that Abby said, namely I do think she could use a little bit more honey and a lot less vinegar in her teaching style, I do think that this was a good analogy to use, especially for Jill, who is also starting to sound like another dreaded parental archetype in private education, specifically the one that wants to know how much money do you want me to pay you to give my child the advantage parent.
Mm-hmm.
If you thought Rory's grandparents donating a building to Yale to get her out of trouble in Gilmore Girls was unrealistic, I can unfortunately confirm and beg to differ that this is it happens, and it's horribly detrimental to your child's health and safety.
While I am not a fan of how Abby teaches her children, I very much am a fan of how she teaches her parents.
That's my thing, is like, I think Abby could really carve out a niche for herself if she didn't fully, that's what I was saying earlier, is I think she enjoys being mean to the kids, and that's why I don't think she would ever want to leave it. I think she actually really enjoys that. She could carve out a niche teaching classes for dance parents, and she'd be damn good at it. But that's not where she gets her shine. Because which parent does she get the most like satisfying fulfillment of her supply from? Kelly. What did Kelly used to be? Her student. In an interview, Kelly tells us that she actually really enjoyed seeing Abby shut Jill down because she feels like Jill has ulterior motives and that she's probably willing to do anything to get Kendall ahead. Unfortunately, if you hear some distant mooing in the background, it is not, again, because you need to adjust your headphones. It is because we are headed to Ohio, where the candy apples are hard at work. And Kathy is telling her dancers that they really need to go out there and really show people their technique. In an interview, Kathy tells us that this weekend will be the first time she's seen any of the dance moms since going to Hollywood. She says the competition in Hollywood was really humiliating for her.
Oh,
Preach.
why?
But that she knows she just has to pick herself up, dust herself off, and get right back out there and show them what she and her team are made of. Like, okay, Disney Channel original movie. Go off, I guess. I have to say, making Rachel laugh is like one of my absolute favorite activities. We get a shot of the group rehearsing together, and by that I mean we get a shot of 3 older girls dancing, Justice mostly posing in the background and dancing occasionally, and Vivi being brought out at the end and hoisted up by Justice in her iconic and recurring role in this series, Vivi, the human prop. We kind of get the feeling that Kathy has stacked the deck with older dancers, So the group seems advanced, but then she brings out Justice and Vivi solely to bring the age average down for entering the competition, which I find extra crummy from a dance teacher perspective because it paints the older dancers in a negative light. And it also makes a total waste of Justice, who is such a talented and advanced dancer for his age. And he could do so much more if Kathy either paired him with other dancers his size for partner work or just lowered the difficulty level just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little. He's really advanced. And like, listen, don't get me started on Vivi. I don't want to talk about it. It makes me mad. Don't ask. It is the next day, and we join Christy and Kelly on their way to lunch for a regularly scheduled production field trip of the week. In interview, Christy tells us that the topic du jour is, of course, the new girl, because, I mean, obviously. Kelly says she can't believe that Jill was actually mad and surprised that Kendall was at the bottom of the pyramid, and Christy says that she couldn't believe that Jill actually said she couldn't worry about anyone else's kids because she has to worry about Kendall. Two things. One, Jill saying that still, again, it had to sound and feel so jarring to the moms because while Melissa has said some shady stuff and done some shisty things, she also really, really loved the Highland girls, and that was completely apparent to all of the moms. And she was just as supportive as all of the other moms of Nia just last week. So, like, they do know that she has some limits. And two, this whole lunch is so produced that it ends up giving me deleted scene from Mean Girls vibes, and I love it, and I can't decide if this content has me dead or living my best life. I don't know. Christy then pulls out some show and tell, and it is a competition scorebook from a few years back.
We
Christy
love Christy.
Christy asks Kelly if she remembers Jill being kind of like non-committal in a passive-aggressive sort of way about whether Chloe and Maddie had ever outscored Kendall at competition. Kind of like, yeah, no, I don't really remember that happening. And Christy goes on to show Kelly that this book proves that it did happen, and not by a super tight margin. I'm not going to go into specifics here. The episode is out there, so if you're really just that curious, you can go check. But I think it's important to remember that Christy said herself that this book is a few years old, so Chloe would have been around 7 or 8 years old. Maddie would have been around 6 or 7, and Kendall would have only been 5 or 6. So is it surprising that Maddie and Chloe would have been able to score better? Not at all. Might it seem a little weird that Christy cares this much about it? To some, sure. Is it totally avoidable if Jill would just wise the hell up, realize the producers are not her friends, and stop being so cagey and yet also weirdly aggressive with all of the moms all of the time? Like 100,000,000,000%. Christy and Kelly agree that they should do some more digging on Jill to find out why Jill really came to their studio and why she's such a studio hopper. Even though, like, outside of the show, they completely and totally knew exactly why Jill was there. It was to be on the show. They just cannot say that on camera. And Christy tells us that she doesn't think that someone who talks like this all the time can really be trusted. And with that, we head into the next day. So it's day 3, and Abby is running Brooke solo, which she tells us is a lyrical acro number called Garden of Eden, and she tells us that Brooke is really good at this number and that she's really going to impress the judges with it. And in the Back to the Bar podcast, Christy pointed out something that I found really interesting. She said to Kelly, she's like, isn't it so funny that like last week when your kid was like just a member of the group dance and there were no stakes, she's trashy, she's lazy, she's sloppy. But this week, when Abby needs something out of her, she's amazing. She's going to leave the audience wanting more. All of her tricks are fantastic, and she's so great at this number.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, now we head back to the land of the cows, and at the Candy Apples studio, Kathy is getting ready to work with Erica on her solo. Kathy tells Erica to remember that the ALDC has been added to their list of enemies, and that she's going to be going head-to-head with Brooke. Like,
which
children.
So that was one thing that I wrote down. It's like you have a repertoire of enemies. Like you have a list. Like, first of all, you're speaking negatively of other kids, which then encourages the child that you're working with to view them negatively. but you're pushing someone down in order to step on top of them, but like you're teaching kids that they want enemies,
right?
like
A list of them.
Like you should not be proud that you have a list of enemies.
Kacie goes on to tell Erica that Brooke is a title winner, just like she is, but that she doesn't think that Brooke is a 2-time title holder like Erica is, which is ridiculous because Kelly has confirmed that by this point in her life, Brooke had won at least 10 titles. She's pretty sure it's more, but she can confirm it's at least 10. Kacie tells us in an interview that her main message to Abby this week is like, sure, you're a good dance studio, but so are we. And she says that she wants Abby to know that she's not the only successful person around here. And then she starts talking in the third person. She says, Kathy has a dance studio that's very successful too, so Abby should know that. Madam, like, what the hell is even this? Stop it and get some help. Kacie goes on to tell Erica that Brooke is good at flipping around and crawling on the dance floor on her neck, so she can't be any competition for Erica and all of her amazing turn combinations. Please kill me now. It is now time for one of the most iconic moments in all of Dance Mom's history, but I do also not want to spend that much time on it because the child involved has said that she's a little bit tired of hearing about it all of these years later. Kathy tells Vivi that she's going to be a spot for Erica while she's turning, so she has to paying really close attention and not moving around too much, and that if she does this, Kathy will get her a puppy. Which, like, please do not bribe your children with pets. That's what sweets and toys and trips to the movies are for. Pets are living beings that need to be taught to and framed as the responsibility they are. You can absolutely celebrate bringing a pet into the family, but please do not make the pet a treat. Kathy pinky swears with Vivi to get her the dog, and when she pulls away, one of her rings scrapes Vivi's little finger just a bit, but it does cause a small scratch that results in some blood. And Kathy apologizes and gets her a Band-Aid. And in an interview, Vivi tells us that her mom hurt her finger and she hopes she can still dance.
I love it.
Of course, she says this in her like iconic Vivi dry way. So it has become one of the most famously referenced moments in all of Dance Moms. It sounds so funny and unserious and super Vivi because, as Vivi said last year, she doesn't like dance, she doesn't like pink, she would rather play softball, she doesn't want to be here. But like to this day, Vivi still gets comments about it on her socials, no matter what she's posting. Like if it's just a picture of her friends at the football game for her school, people are asking how her finger is and can she still dance this weekend. And she's still like really nice about it, and she's like, yeah, I mean, I get it, and I'm not that mad at, like, I'm not mad about it, but it does kind of, it happened a long time ago. I can only imagine how actually irritating that might be. I'm not saying she is irritated, I can't talk for her, but I would be irritated. So back at the ALDC, the girls are running the group dance, and up in dance jail, Christy tells Jill that she has something to show her. She pulls out the competition book from lunch with Kelly, and Jill kind of rolls her eyes, but all of the other moms are here for it. Holly's smirking, Kelly's laughing, and even Melissa claps her hands excitedly and points at Jill. Christy reads off the scores, and Jill just rolls her eyes again and says, oh, but you don't care about winning, right? Like, ma'am, I do not think that Christy has ever said in her life she doesn't care about winning. Then, in an interview, Jill tells us that she doesn't care if Christy or any of these moms are intimidated by her and her little 8-year-old. She's going to stick it out, and they're staying. Like, once again, she is missing the entire point, because the entire point of this exercise was that no one here is intimidated by you, and they just want you to stop saying that you and Kendall are better than everyone and deserve more than the rest of them, and, like, that's it. They aren't being jealous. They aren't running scared. This is just what annoyance looks like. The moms then start talking about the rats and the snoods, and Melissa and Jill procured them at the store, so they pull them out. Kelly exclaims that she was really hoping that no one was going to be able to find those and that they wouldn't end up having to wear them. She holds one of the snoods up and says, like, after you saw how ugly these things were, why would you go ahead and purchase them? Why wouldn't you just tell Abby we couldn't find them? And in an interview, Kelly tries to help us get to know the rat and snood a little bit better. She tells us that the rat is a thing you put in the front of your hair and you roll your hair around it so you can end up looking just like George Washington, and that a snood is a really ugly, thick hairnet. She also tells us that Melissa and Jill need to be taught the special rule about leaving the ugly thing at the store where it belongs and telling Abby that you just couldn't find it anywhere so the girls do not have to wear whatever it is. Christy tells us that she thinks that Jill is trying to play the part of a good team player to Abby right now because that's all she's got, but that Christy worries what Jill's going to be like when she gets off of probation and what she's really going to be like to deal with. Abby is getting ready to run solos downstairs, of which there were multiple this week, but Brooke is the only one that's being featured. So Kelly heads downstairs to bring Brooke and Paige their props that she had been rhinestoning. Abby freaks out that Kelly is bringing the girls their stuff instead of having them go get it themselves because bringing it to them is for babies, apparently. And when Kelly points out that the girls couldn't have brought them in themselves because she had only just finished making them, Abby starts yelling at her for interrupting rehearsal. Now, to me, I feel like this is another one of those situations that no matter what the Highlands did, they were set up to fail.
Mhm.
If Kelly let the kids bring in their unfinished props, she's lazy and they are irresponsible. If she lets them go to solo rehearsal without their props and also not knowing where they are irresponsible and they're stupid. If she finishes the props just in time for rehearsal and brings them in for them, she's babying them. Kelly and Abby get into another argument, with Kelly telling Abby to be very clear about what she wants because she's been telling Holly that she needs to be more hands-on, or if she isn't, she doesn't really care about Nia, but that she tells the hands-on moms that they're smothering and babying their kids. Abby says that what she really wants is to kick the Highlands out and to call 2 of the older dancers from the audition last week to come and be a part of the dance. Kelly tells her to go ahead and replace them. She doesn't care. And as Kelly leaves to go back upstairs, Abby tells us that no one has the right to interrupt her rehearsals because no one pays her that much. Who's going to tell her that she's really the only one who interrupted things? And saying that what Kelly did constitutes an interruption is like saying someone talking during intermission of a performance is interrupting. And this is what I meant about intrafamilial family torture. Because this was a week where multiple kids had solos. We also know, due to what kind of solos we see being, what costumes we see happening later, these also weren't the only girls with props. And I doubt these were the only girls that parents brought things to. So, aside from the interruption bit, the babying thing, why the Highlands?
I do think, though, that, Kelly making that statement is, first of all, here's your double standard. Let me just lay it out for you.
Kelly heads back upstairs, and as Abby restarts rehearsal, she asks Paige if her mom is drunk. Abby goes on to mime drinking to Kelly through the observation window and exaggeratedly mouthing, asking if she's drunk in front of all the moms and, of course, all the kids. This is, of course, thoroughly upsetting to Kelly, but it also gets Holly particularly hot under the collar. Rachel, can you tell us what it's called when people with narcissistic tendencies do what Abby just did here? What is the name for this behavior?
I don't know if there's a specific name, but my go-to quote is, "An accusation from a narcissist is often a confession." Now, I'm not saying that Abby enjoys imbibing, but because we never actually see her drink anything. But it certainly is an accusation, and it is completely unfounded.
No, I think that's actually, I don't think, not related specifically to alcoholism, but Abby loves to hold her moms to a specifically high moral standard. She'll come after Kalani's mom for dating a guy and moving in with her boyfriend when they're not married. But Abby loves to make sexually suggestive TikToks and make comments on younger men's Instagram photos that make the young men pretty uncomfortable. So it's the not for me thing.
Mm-hmm.
But because she did it in front of the kids, and after last week when she said the thing about the Highlands grandma, It just added an extra layer that made me so sad and angry. Kelly, understandably, has another breakdown. She says she doesn't know why she's still here, that she can never understand why Abby's surprised that Brooke wants to leave dance and do other things. And in an interview, she tells us that she doesn't know what to do because she feels like she should stick up for herself regarding what just happened with Abby, but that she knows that if she does, Abby will just take it out on her girls. So she's stuck with Abby torturing her or with Abby torturing her kids. Kelly starts crying a little harder and she tells the moms that she just doesn't know what to do anymore, that she doesn't know why she puts her kids through this. It's now day 4 and we're back in Ohio. Kathy is running her group dance and she tells us that she has come up with a new plan to come back with a vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
That when her kids step on stage, Abby's team won't know what hit them. Back in Pittsburgh, Abby is yelling at the girls because, duh, and she's yelling at them, of course, about getting too excited about their new costumes for this weekend. And she tells them that they're all acting like a bunch of 3-year-olds. It's just like a narcissist to always want whatever you are not giving them. The girls don't show enough enthusiasm. They're careless slugs. They get excited. It's too much and they're acting like toddlers. You made them brownies. They wanted a cake. You got them something yellow and they wanted gold.
Mm-hmm.
Up in dance jail, the moms have spotted the costumes and they do not share the girls' excitement. They question for a moment, like, are those really for us? Are our kids wearing those? And I will say that it's definitely the kind of costume that works all in a group up on stage, but like just one-on-one with an individual child, it's not the cutest. All group performance kids get at least one of these costumes like this in their stage life. It makes for cringy pictures, but like you get over it. And I will say the bright side is these girls will most likely only have to wear this the one time, maybe twice if Abby decides to revive the number at the year-end dance concert. I had a costume like this that I had to wear for 4 years straight. As the moms get to work stoning the costumes, Jill is getting the lowdown on what it's like going up against Kathy. The moms tell her about Kathy stealing Chloe's solo music and physically taking Kenzie's very first dance costume and donating it to Goodwill after being allowed to just borrow it for Vivi's solo. So they tell her to prepare for, kind of anything. And after that, Abby decides to call Jill and Holly down to the studio to give them notes on Nia and Kendall in the group dance. While Jill's away, Christy and Kelly decide that this is the perfect opportunity to do some digging on Jill. They pump Melissa for some info, telling her that she's free to talk because Jill's not here. But Melissa doesn't really give them what they're looking for. When they ask why Jill's at their studio, Melissa just says that she's always wanted to come here, but she's been a little wary of Abby. They also ask Melissa why Jill's been to 3 studios in the last 6 years if she's lived in the same place. And Christy says that she also doesn't think that Jill's just a studio hopper because she's heard that Jill was getting kicked out of dance studios. And while Melissa tells them that she just thinks that Jill gets tired of studios, Kelly quips that she also gets tired of her dance studio but somehow manages to stick it out. I'm going to say that there's this like weird notion in the dance community, particularly with like competition parents, that you should absolutely be staying at the same dance studio for as much of your dance life as possible. Where I personally know lots of dance educators and myself feel like that's a little weird. There are just so many reasons why you and your family might need a change. Jill had 3 kids that danced. 3 studios would be completely reasonable. They're all going to be different dancers with different dance and learning styles. Sometimes your schedule doesn't align, or the studio moves to a building that's no longer accessible for your family. Moving to a studio that focuses more on a specific style or a certain type of program, like all of these are completely normal and valid reasons to change things up. So, like, let's not shame studio hopping because it's weird. I'm not saying that those are the reasons that Jill studio hops, and I do think that the moms might have been right that hers might have been a little bit more drama based, but because that's always the assumption, it's kind of like Disney with their assumption that everyone is trying to fake to get the disability pass. If you're always assuming that parents are studio hopping because of drama, you're not allowing children to access the best dance education, and that is so weird.
Hill to die on.
It's a weird hill to die on. So weird. It's now the day before competition, and we're on the bus on the way to Ohio. Abby is, of course, yelling at the bus driver, and Melissa and Jill, of course, are giving Abby presents. And Abby tells them that what she really needs them to bring her is a husband. Ugh. Not the yuck at the idea of Abby getting married or being in a relationship. It's like, why would you say that to someone when they gave you a present? She doesn't say thank you. We arrive in Columbus, and as everyone's checking into the hotel, Kelly gets a special note. Inside the envelope is an invitation for all the moms to a soiree at the presidential suite at the Sheraton Hotel, letting them know that cocktail attire is encouraged. And then at the bottom of the envelope, Kelly finds a little charm, and it's shaped like an apple, letting them know who sent the missive. Kelly tells us that she's not sure what Kathy's up to, but they're going to go anyway. Like they had a choice. We all know this is production.
Oh, for sure.
The moms arrive at the Sheraton and discover that this soiree is really just Kathy alone in her hotel room. But there is wine and appetizers. So they go in.
Appetizers.
Appetizers. I wonder if she was serving apple teenies. Kathy tells us that she wants to show these Pittsburgh moms how her studio travels. First class all the way. Ma'am, you are in a chain hotel, and I am pretty sure that production set everything up for you. But you know, Kathy, because she's just going to go C-class all the way. Kathy starts asking the moms if they're really happy, if they're truly happy at Abby's studio, and if they think that Abby's really a good leader. She tells them that she thinks that they'd all just be so much happier at a studio that they enjoyed being at. Christy points out that this is starting to sound an awful lot like a plot to seduce them away from Abby, and asks Kathy if she's out to poach them. Kathy replies that she doesn't see anything wrong with that, and Kathy then turns to Kelly and asks if she and Abby have been fighting already, which, like, low-hanging fruit, Kathy.
Fruit.
And when Kelly admits that, of course, they have, Kathy says that she just really thinks that they would be happier at someone else's studio, but, you know, like, we catch her drift. Christy tells us in an interview that she never thought that Kathy would try to steal them from Abby because she thought they hated them. It's now competition day, and as the bus pulls up to the competition, Abby reminds everyone that the candy apples will be here and that they can't act happy or excited to see them. No hugging your friends, don't ask how they are, don't make eye contact. It's really just such lovely things to teach your kids here, Abby.
Really, just specifically Vivi. Like, that's the only person that I think that excludes. Cause
maybe Justice, because they hadn't met him at this point.
Maybe Justice, yeah.
Kathy is having her dancers get ready, comparing their bodies to those of Abby's dancers and telling them how much better their bodies are. God, these two were just so fucking gross.
Do not speak about children's bodies. Point blank, period. Unless you are teaching a child how to accommodate a child with a disability that is physical, do not comment on other children's bodies.
Abby's group walks by Kathy and her dancers, and Kathy points out that Abby still has a curler in her hair. Abby gets flustered and then accuses the girls of knowing that it was there all along and just not telling her. Of course, now that Abby has been embarrassed in front of her nemesis, the children must pay. So as soon as they reach the dressing room, she is screaming. They better be on point today. They better remember what she yelled at them about yesterday and the day before that and what she yelled at them about 3 days ago and all the way back on Monday too. In an interview, Abby tells us that she's going to go for entertainment value and that she's not going to go for all this hooting and hollering that Kathy thinks she needs to go for. And she doesn't have to go for all those extras. She's just going to put out a good, clean routine on the stage, and when she points her arrow at the target, she's going to hit a bullseye. What the fuck are you talking about, Abigail? Like, even in a recap, weeks later, Kathy really brings out the most unhinged version of Abby. Like, you think it's bad on a day-to-day basis, but then you remember what she's like whenever Kathy's around, and you realize it could be so much worse. Then Abby goes over to Kendall and she starts telling her that she could earn her jacket this week, or she could totally lose her spot on the team and just go back to regular classes. It all comes down to this performance. What a great way to motivate an 8-year-old. Upon hearing this, Jill rushes over and asks Abby exactly what she wants Kendall to do. Abby tells Jill that Kendall needs to go out on stage and make all of her corrections from the week during the performance. So basically, Abby just came up to an 8-year-old 5 minutes before the test and told her that she has to ace it or go back to pre-K. No time to study, no time to do anything but freak herself out. In an interview, Abby goes on to tell us that she thinks that Kendall's forgotten that she's on probation. No, Abby, she has not forgotten, you petty, petulant pine cone. She can't have forgotten she's 8 and you never explained it to her in the first place. The moms are getting the girls' hair done for the group routine, and when Abby discovers a terrible injustice has been committed, she cannot let it go unnoticed. The snoods are not all the same. One is thicker, like a real old-fashioned snood, while the rest of them are just like a thicker, darker colored version of a modern nylon hairnet. Abby no likey. Abby starts yelling that these hair pieces could make or break this whole number. And how could these moms do this to her? How could they be so stupid as to see the good one and still get the crappy ones? And worse,
do they score on hair?
you get an appearance score for like costuming, but I don't know that anyone's going to look that closely at it. And worse, how could they bring her a mismatched mess like this? Holly, who procured said snoods, tells Abby that she went to 4 stores and that this is what she could find. Now remember, Holly works a full-time job and has 4 children. So in an interview, Abby tells us that Holly was lamenting about being sent to 4 stores, like she was sent on the quest to Camelot. But Abby says that she doesn't want to hear it until Holly goes to 14 stores. I would just like to remind Abby that once again, as both the A and the L in the ALDC, this is her responsibility, especially if it's going to send her into a Hall of Fame hissy fit every single week. Abby comes up with a suitable solution, the creative genius that she is. She says that Nia will wear the thicker net on stage while the other girls will don the thinner ones. But even with that settled, Holly says that she never wants to hear the word snood again. She's tired of it, which I don't blame her. I almost don't want to hear the word snood again. Do you know how many times I had to type that?
It's just a weird word.
It is a weird word.
I always
it
think
sounds
of
like sneed.
Yeah.
And I don't need a sneed.
You don't sneed. You don't sneed a snood.
I don't need a snood. Next, in a discussion that sounds very much like production is making us bring this up, how on earth do we make it seem natural? The moms bring up Kathy inviting them over last night. Abby is a bit shocked and confused because she assumed that after they all checked in together that everyone just went to bed. But Kelly says no, that they had gone up to their rooms to change for a soiree, which had really just ended up being code for Kathy alone in her hotel room trying to convince us all to leave ALDC for candy apples.
I mean, soiree is kind of an exaggeration for.
But it's so Kathy coded. Like, of course that's the word she picked.
Oh, of course.
Abby says that she would never stoop to such levels and that this just shows what kind of person Kathy really is. And we'll see how these statements hold up, because as much as Abby might not throw weirdly coded cocktail parties, she does throw weirdly coded auditions and calls people to come to her studio all the time with promises of better training and better opportunities. And at the real heart of it, isn't that sort of the same thing? Feels like it.
Mm-hmm.
The girls head backstage for the group, and of course, Kathy has to pop backstage and wish them luck. Even if production did send Kathy to do this, I'm still holding Kathy personally responsible for her actions here, because she repeatedly tells them good luck. And anyone
knows better.
Yes, anyone in performance knows you never wish someone luck. You tell them to break a leg. And we all know Kathy knew that and said it to these kids anyway. She also pulls Kendall off to the side and quizzes her about whether or not she's the new girl. Like, you couldn't figure that out for yourself, Kathy? And she comments to Kendall about that thing in her hair and how much she doesn't like their costumes. This is simply disgusting behavior from anyone even half her age, let alone from a teacher. I I could not handle it. The girls take the stage for the group dance, and we actually get a decent shot of the routine. The girls all seem to be doing well and enjoying themselves, and the number comes off super cute. They do interrupt the dance at one point, though, for Kacie to tell us that she noticed all the little apples and that they made her feel very well represented. A number called Bad Apples made you feel represented? I don't know what to tell you, Kacie. I just don't know.
I think she's trying to play it off like it doesn't, like
ooh, I got to them.
Negative attention is good attention for her.
After the girls have finished the number, Christy tells us that she really thinks that the 40s look really set the girls apart today and that they were really animated and their facial expressions were great. So she thinks that that really helped keep the energy up, and she also thinks that that helped them stand out from their competition too. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and see how awards go. Next is the Candy Apples group number with a Spanish-inspired contemporary seeming group called Baile Española, or Spanish Dance. We don't get as good of a shot of this number as we did of Bad Apples, so I can't tell you if Kathleen's claims about her dance and her dancers are true, but what I can tell you is that the older girls do the majority of the choreography, and while Justice just sort of stands there on the stage, he does do some posing. When he's standing on the stage, he's not even off in the wings. It's not just like we can just see him because of the camera angle. Nope, he's just standing there with his hands behind his back. It's really awkward. And then, of course, Vivi is brought out right at the end to be hoisted up by Justice to fulfill her role as Vivi the Living Prop. Melissa tells us that from the moment the CADC team took the stage, she couldn't believe how much older almost every single dancer on their team looked than almost every single dancer on the ALDC team. Abby tells us that she thought the Candy Apples dance was great, but that those girls are much older and more developed dancers. All of the older dancers are female than pretty much all of the dancers on her team, and all of those older dancers can do things like several combination turns in unison in their group, and her kids just can't do that because her kids are not physically capable yet. Also making its first appearance in the Dance Moms universe, this episode is something that will haunt us for years to come. Kathy's insistence that her dancers wear neon purple eyeshadow for every performance, no matter what costume they're wearing. In my book, no one is allowed to tell another team that they don't like their costume or their hair when they seem to think that neon lavender goes with the black and red Spanish dresses she's dressing her kids in that day. After the CADC dancers have finished their performance, Abby turns to Kacie and tells her that she's noticed how much older her dancers seemed, and that they almost all seemed pretty much like fully grown. Abby tells us that seeing Kacie play the numbers this way to scheme her way into a lower age category has really made her question Kathie's integrity as a teacher. And I don't like agreeing with Abby, but I agree with Abby. Back in the ALDC dressing room, Abby is fully French pressed about the whole situation, and so she is naturally yelling at the children. She says that Kendall went early and she needs to learn how to read music so she can learn how to listen to music. Jill hears this and comes rushing over to Kendall's defense because, as we all know, she cannot help herself. She cannot shut up. Jill asks Abby if, Abby doesn't think that it's awfully unfair that all of those Candy Apples dancers were just so much older than their girls. And she's like laying on the 900 voice real thick. But Abby says that that can't matter. It shouldn't matter. This week's dance was an easy baby dance and they still messed it up. All the kids messed it up.
I think for them to hear that, like, it just drains all of the accomplishment that they felt out of
the kids.
It just destroys their morale. They're like,
oh, that was easy? You do it, Abby. Jill, of course, is still trying to convince Abby that this really comes down to the Candy Apples dancers being just so much older than them, and Abby is all the way done with this. And I kind of think she was all the way done with Jill at this point. So she says that that is just a technicality and that it's none of Jill's business and nothing for Jill to worry about. She tells everyone that they have to be so good all on their own that Abby shouldn't have to go looking for technicalities to excuse their losses. We head to group awards, and in the audience, Kacie is still obsessing over Abby Lee's dancers' hairdos. She asks the moms how they managed to create those Amish hairstyles, and Christy tells her that those are not Amish. It's a rat and a snood. It's traditional 40s. And that Kacie should probably know that. And the way that Christy says it is just, it's so
We
iconic.
love Christy. And so does Etta.
So do the dogs, as they should. They know their icons. They understand. In an interview, Christy tells us that Kacie needs to start thinking before she speaks because her material is just really not up to par today. Awards begin, and the girls take first place. Everyone is jumping up and down. They're so happy. Kenzie is smiling so big that you can't even see her eyes. Her cheeks and her eyebrows have fully merged. Meanwhile, Kathy's team doesn't even place. And I don't want to make a big deal out of this because those are real children, and I am sure they all worked very hard. But, like, Kathy, let that be a lesson to you. Don't do yucky things. Okay? In the audience, Abby says that she's ready for some pork chops and applesauce, and Christy asks Kacie how she likes them apples. Very original. Great job, guys. Kacie decides to confront the judges, telling them that, she never makes a fuss, but this is ridiculous. She wants to see those scores. And the judges oblige and show her that Bad Apples scored a 287 and Baile Española only scored a 275. And we need to remember that in dance, every single whole point is worth a lot. Scoring and placement for awards usually comes down to fractions, tenths of a point. So Abby beat her by 12.
I put down because she said, they barely beat us.
Hold on. So in an interview, Kacie tells us that it's fine that Abby barely beat them in the group. Cough, cough, 12 points is way more than barely. Cough, cough. Because even though she's upset, it's got to be fine because she's still got to get Erica ready to compete with Brooke and that she still thinks they can still win this. Back in the ALDC dressing room, everyone is rushing to get Brooke ready, and Abby says that they really just need to focus on getting Brooke ready for the stage and making sure she feels comfortable because she's going to be dancing against older girls and they can't afford any mistakes. I want us to remember that Abby just said that Brooke is going to be dancing against older girls. Okay, before Brooke goes on stage, she tells us that the Candy Apples dancers did really well earlier, so it made her a little nervous. Brooke takes the stage, and she really nails it. We get a good shot of the number, and Brooke's just so talented. Like, I don't understand how Abby could ever call her lazy or unimpressive or uninspired. She's incredible.
Like, if you are not impressed by her talent, and you were the one who trained her, that's like when a parent's like, oh, I don't, well, I hate my kid. Well, you raised them. Like, that's a reflection on you and not a reflection on the child.
Once Brooke finishes the routine, we can see Kenzie waiting in the wings to hug her with her arms outstretched almost wider than Kenzie is tall.
I put that down. I was like, Kenzie in the wings.
I know. And I just wanted to highlight, Kenzie and Brooke always had a really special relationship. Brooke thought of Kenzie as like her own little baby, and it is so cute. They have really similar dance styles, and Kenzie always felt that made her special. She was like Brooke, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. In an interview, Kelly tells us that Abby told her in the audience that Brooke did great. And Kelly says that for Abby to have said that, Brooke had to have done pretty good. And after what Abby said to Brooke last week, she'd better have said all of these nice things to Brooke's face and apologize. Erica's up next, and Kacie tells us that everything is up to Erica now to bring them some justice. Ma'am, justice is sitting with you in the audience. What a weird way to word it.
Thank you.
Erica takes the stage, and from what we get to see of the dance, she does very well, although I will say that I don't think that we were hearing the real music on the show that was made for her solo. I think they dubbed it, and it's one of the most free use sounding songs that they ever used on the show, so much so that it distracts me from Erica's dancing, which is too bad because she is very talented. After Erica finishes performing, Abby tells us that she's a little bit worried because while both girls gave really beautiful performances, Erica's dancing is just a bit more mature than Brooke's is. Back in the dressing rooms, the vibes could not be more different. On the Candy Apple side of things, everyone is happy with how the solo went. They're all excited for Erica and they cannot wait for awards. While on the ALDC side of things, everyone is stressed because Brooke and Erica were competing in the 11 to 12 year age group. We need to remember that competitions have a fallback date for registration, where if your child hadn't had their most recent birthday by that date, they can still compete in the younger age. But something feels off. And Erica just seems too matured, too developed as a dancer to just be a little bit older to qualify for the fallback like Brooke did. She seems more like an actual high schooler. And this is what I meant by I said I want us to remember that Abby said that Brooke was going to be competing against older girls. Brooke's 13, but she qualifies for the age fallback. Where are the older girls? Brooke is the older girls. Anyway, just then, a couple of competition administrators enter the Candy Apple's dressing room and ask to speak with Kathy and Erica's mom in the hallway. The competition director tells Kathy that they need her to provide birth certificates for her dancers because they have been receiving complaints all day about Erica being listed in the program as being allowed to compete in the 11 to 12 age group when she is normally known to compete in 13 and up. Kathy gets very huffy and says that she's never been required to provide birth certificates anywhere else. So the director then just asks how old Erica is. Erica's mom says she's 14, and then the director asks for Erica's birth date once she's given those details. Mom complies. They air Erica's whole birth date on national TV. I will not be saying it here. What the fuck? The director chastises them, saying that Erica was entered in the wrong age category, she belonged in 13 and up, and that she will no longer be allowed to compete today. I am sure that production had something to do with this. We know that they were actually the ones submitting the entries for competitions. And like doing this to a kid is so rotten. But Kathy going along with it and letting them hurt one of her kids and then her response to it are just so vile. Kathy calls out to the director that she better go and check up on the ALDC entrant, Brooke, and ask for her birth certificate too, and the director just replies that she'll follow up with that later and walks away. The administrators do end up paying a visit to Abby's dressing room, and they ask to verify Brooke's age. Abby...
I love the difference in the way that the director approached it, because with Kathy, the director said, we've had a lot of complaints from people in the competition, meaning a lot of people had the same complaint. And when she brought it to Abby, she said, hey, we had someone. Mm-hmm. We had a singular person challenge.
One thing that surprised me is Abby was surprisingly calm during this entire interaction.
I think because Abby knew that she was in the, like, she was accurate.
So Abby surprisingly, very calmly, just asked if Kathy was the source of the complaint, and they say that she was. And she says that she'll have her staff fax everything right over, and the competition approves that Brooke was right where she was supposed to be age-wise. The reason I found this so interesting is that Kathy was always saying how much more organized her studio was than Abby's. But when she was asked to provide verifiable proof of her dancers' identities, because she was asked for birth certificates, she was sent into a full-blown fit. Abby, however, who usually breaks all the way down at even the mere suggestion that she might have done something wrong, even when she is verifiably right, had it all together, was totally fine, and was cracking jokes, and got all the paperwork in a jiffy. And I think just analyzing this scene made me completely question reality, because there have been other times where Abby's been in the right, and she's still having a full-blown meltdown. And in this case, she was completely fine, and I was just like...
And it also just reinforces the fact that it was not an Abby Lee Dance Company attack. It was multiple people at that competition. It was not like a Abby going to the judges and saying, hey, I'm not sure she's that age. It was other people who knew her in the community saying, hey, she doesn't belong in this category.
Back in the Candy Apples dressing room, Erica is crying, and her mom and Kathy are just telling her that everyone else is just jealous and that even though she danced her heart out, other people are just ruining it for her. And I just think that this is such a gross way to handle this. I mean, I know they probably didn't want to take responsibility themselves, especially if production did it, but like, right, what do we think you should be telling kids that like do we think that you should tell other people that kids are like other kids are jealous of them? And
No.
what do we think Kathy and Erica's mom should have been doing instead here? Cuz
I think that Kathy should have owned up to it and said, I'm sorry, you ended up getting entered in the wrong category. She didn't even have to take responsibility for it. She could have just said, I'm sorry, you were entered in the wrong category and it was an oversight. And I'm sorry. Like, there's nothing else that we can do about it. It's not that people were jealous, it's that you were entered in the wrong category, and you probably would have placed and been awarded had you been in the right category in the first place.
okay, we head to solo awards and Brooke takes first. Back in the dressing room, we get a glimpse of Maddie in her Snow White costume from later in the season, and Paige in her solo costume from a number that was apparently very good, so of course they never aired it. Like, we can't have people believing Paige is a good dancer. We get the start of another Dance Moms universe tradition, Kathy coming into the ALDC dressing room at the end of competitions. Kathy enters and incites an argument with Abby and the moms, although really it's just primarily Christy. She thanks them for their apples tribute and says even their team colors honor her. And Abby says that her colors have been the same since way back in the 80s. And Kathy snarks that Abby better show her a birth certificate for that. But like, don't worry, guys, it's not like she's bitter or anything.
It's not that, like, Abby wasn't even the one that challenged it, Kathy.
She can't separate that. In an interview, Abby tells us that Kathy came in and went straight to nasty. Back in the dressing room, Abby brings up Kathy trying to poach her team, and Kathy plays all innocent, and so Christy, chaos gremlin that she is, calls her out. Kathy tells Christy to be careful, or she'll tell Abby all of the not so nice things that she's had to say about Abby at the party and just in general. Christy retorts that she's sure that Kathy would just love if all the moms and dancers left Abby for her studio, and Kathy says that Christy thinks far too highly of herself. Kathy then makes fun of the way Christy dresses. Christy then makes fun of Kathy's age. Kathy then calls Christy nose, and Christy calls Kathy grandma. Honestly, it's kind of like watching the stepsisters from Cinderella go at it. Not that either of them are ugly. It's just like that nitpicky, tit for tat, all 100% low blows and 100% exhausting to watch kind of bickering. The episode ends with Christy telling us that Kathy is a geriatric mean girl, and then her trying to shoo Kathy out of the dressing room, telling her to be gone. She has no powers here. And that is the end of season 2, episode 2 of Dance Moms. I think our hot button topics are definitely not apparent racism, because accusing Holly of child neglect is fucking wild. Like weaponizing chemical dependency. That was disgusting. And talking about children's bodies. Ew.
Do it. Don't even compliment them. Like, we don't need to hear, oh,
No.
they look so good now that they've lost weight. Like,
Intrafamilial family torture, definitely. And we will have resources for all of those things. And we will definitely add in there a resource about how to talk to loved ones about actual suspected addiction and alcoholism, because those things are important to know how to approach and when to approach, because the representation I got in this show was horrific, but we're not surprised because Abby Lee Miller. And Rachel, what was your takeaway from this show?
don't go into kids' bodies.
Don't comment on kids' bodies.
But also, like, take ownership when things happen that are beyond the child's control. Don't blame other people for it. Don't blame other kids for it, because the kids are not the enemy.
I think my takeaway in general is just kids are not your enemy. I think both Abby and Kathy weirdly never learned that, and yet they educate children, and that is weird.
Like, kids, we cannot assign adult intentions to kid brains.
No, it's weird that we try to. It's so weird. Anyway, that's going to be it for us. Thanks for hanging out. We love you bunches, and we will see you next time. As always, I have been Kacie, not Rachel.
And I have been not Kacie, Rachel.
Ooh, she's fancy.
Mixed
We'll see you
it
next
up.
time. Bye.
CBT in the TV is hosted by Rachel Sprague and Kacie Campbell. Our show is produced by Rachel Sprague, Kacie Campbell, and Yakov Paley. Editing by Yakov Paley. Our theme song was written, composed, and performed by Emily McNally. Please join us on Instagram and TikTok at CBT in the TV for even more fun and access to the resources mentioned in today's episode. Thanks for joining us.